You're listening to the Minutes on Growth podcast, the show that brings you mindfully curated insights into relationships, spirituality, personal development, and everything in between, with your host, Tannaz Hosseinpour. Hi, everyone. It's Tannaz Hosseinpour, and welcome to another episode on Minutes on Growth. Today, we have the lovely Emily Golden with us, author, master certified coach, and former corporate HR leader. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Tannaz. I'm so happy to be here today.
We're so happy to have you on. Okay, let's dive right in. Your new book, The New Golden Rule, is out now. Can you tell us a little bit about it? What do you cover in it? And what journey led you to writing this book?
Sure. So The New Golden Rule writing this book was an unexpected journey for me, actually. If you had told me 5 years ago I'd be an author, I would have told you, wrong person. The New Golden Rule is all about treating yourself the way that you want others to treat you. And the reason that I came to the realization that I needed to write this book is through my own journey of self-exploration and transformation. So Tannaz, I spent 17 years in corporate human resources, climbing the ladder. On paper, I had it all, and I was continuing to grow and stretch. I was a high performer, and I was being groomed for bigger positions. I got lots of promotions, and every time I got a promotion, I thought, this time I'm going to feel that feeling of fulfillment and success. And I was proportionately dissatisfied every time. And I realized that there was no amount of money or title that could actually fulfill me deep inside. And that awareness really stopped me in my tracks. It was actually heartbreaking because I didn't know what would satisfy me, but I just knew this way of living would not, or this type of work would not. And that sent me on a journey. I also talk about very openly in my book and in my work that my daughter, diagnosed with Tourette syndrome at the age of 5 in 2010, was a big inflection point for me because I wasn't happy in my career, but I had this amazing family, these healthy children, and I loved being able to go home and spend time with my kiddos. And then this diagnosis hits, and suddenly my home becomes fraught with this stressful diagnosis, and I don't know what the future is going to hold. And then I go to work, and I'm faced with the dissatisfaction there. And so my journey, though I didn't actually find the courage to really start the work to figure out what I wanted to do until really 2015. The awareness that I needed to make a change happened in 2010. And that's what led me here. So I spent 17 years in corporate HR. I found coaching in 2015, partly to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I fell in love with the work. And I realized that so much of what I loved about human resources, working with people, being able to see the gifts and the talents in people was actually work I could do in coaching. I thought maybe I'd become a therapist, and there's a lot of overlap in coaching and therapy. But what I loved about coaching that seemed different than the therapy I had experienced was that it was about taking the awareness and anchoring the awareness in action to be able to then move forward in a new way and in a new direction.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being so vulnerable. It's truly beautiful hearing people shed the layers and show their true feelings and their true thoughts. It's very refreshing. So thank you for that. I was going to ask you, what led to the change, and you pretty much answered it with 2015 coaching. When you were making that shift, when you were stepping into the unknown of the world of coaching, was there any resistance that was building up for you? And if there was, how did you overcome it?
Absolutely. Of course. I am standing here today on the other side of that resistance. And I would not be a human if I didn't face resistance and fear. So, of course, I was afraid of leaving my full-time job, not only was I on an upward trajectory and getting a lot of validation from doing a great job, I was making great money. And I had now two children with Tourette syndrome, both of whom required a lot of support. And that required additional, that required that I was making a good amount of money. So I was fearful of losing that safety. I was fearful of what people might think or find out about me, that I was crazy, that I would walk away from this stability. I was fearful of disappointing my husband and what my parents might think. And I was equally as afraid of continuing to be soul sucked in the role that I was in. And it was through the support of a powerful coach that I created that inner courage to look at the fear and say, you can be there and I can still move forward. It took a lot of courage and consistent work to break through that. I am not going to say it was easy. I'm not going to say that I don't continue to put myself in situations where I face fear and continue to move through it. That's actually what builds confidence. Confidence is not something that we get and then we take action. We actually must put ourselves in situations that we are afraid, that where there's resistance, and that's what builds confidence. And so it took a lot of work. It took me being well supported. It took me working on my own well-being. And it's the best journey that I could have ever imagined. My life is bigger now than I could have ever imagined it would be.
Wow, I feel like you're reading my mind, because I was going to ask you, well, how can we build confidence? And you just answered that. Wonderful. Thank you for talking about that without me having to ask you.
Absolutely.
With your background in HR, and we've never had a guest with an HR background, so it's actually so exciting to ask you about this. You talk about emotional intelligence at work. Can you share with us what you believe are the four most important components of EQ at work?
Sure. So I want to be clear that when I talk about emotional intelligence, I'm talking specifically about a set of emotional and social skills that collectively establish how well we perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain social relationships, cope with challenges, and use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. And I am a student of Dr. Reuven Bar-On's work. So I use the EQI 2.0 assessment, where I do individual assessments and 360 assessments as part of my coaching. I absolutely love this tool. I find it to be the most robust and powerful model. Dr. Bar-On's work was out there before Daniel Goleman, who kind of made emotional intelligence famous or known. And I love Goleman's work as well. I say that all the components of emotional intelligence are powerful and important. For me, emotional self-awareness, interpersonal relationships, stress tolerance, and empathy are incredibly important in any sort of professional's journey or any individual's journey. And I talk about these areas specifically in my book and overall well-being in my book, but it doesn't negate the other areas of emotional intelligence, which include emotional expression is also another area that I talk about. But there's other areas like assertiveness, flexibility, optimism. These are all important areas. For me in my work, though, I've chosen to focus on these 4 or 5 areas myself.
Wonderful. You mentioned stress tolerance. Can you dive a little bit into that? What do you mean by stress tolerance? And we live in a highly triggered world. So we switch on the news and there we go. There's stress on its own. We go to work and, stress of its own kind. At work, in the home, stress of its own kind. How can we better deal with stress? And how can we build resilience if that is a component of stress tolerance? I don't know.
Absolutely. So stress tolerance involves coping with stressful or difficult situations and believing that you can manage or influence situations in a positive manner. And the key is belief. My coaching is all based on the lens through which we look at any situation. So yes, of course, there are circumstances that we are experiencing always, all of the time right now. The circumstances are abundant, let's say. It is our responsibility to be intentional about how we relate to each and every one of those circumstances. We get to be intentional about how much news we take in, what news we listen to, and when. We get to be intentional about where we hold energy and how we release it. One of the most critical pieces of stress tolerance, and my clients hear me saying this, I beat it like a drum, is our emotions are really important and they need a place to be expressed and to move through us. We can't, when we hold on to emotions, this is what leads to the stress buildup, and it's not healthy, right? It lives inside of our body. It's not healthy. Emotions have a beginning, middle, and end. And so part of stress tolerance is knowing how to release that. Building resilience is like building any other muscle. It takes practice. No one is perfect at it, and we all deserve and owe it to ourselves to work on it. So things we can do to build resilience. Really being clear about our well-being basics, our non-negotiables. So what do we need in order to be healthy on a daily basis? How much sleep? What types of foods feel really good in our body? What type of movement? And these sound super simple. And when one of these areas is out or not being handled, it's obvious, right? Talking with a friend, if that is what feels, what feels good for you, or if you're more of an introvert and you like to unwind alone, journaling, writing, getting things out. You have the power to be able to manage your own stress, and when you're finding you're having a hard time with it, please, please, please ask for support. It is an act of courage. It is a sign of strength, not weakness. And the more as leaders we can model asking for support, the better off we will be generations to come.
Wow. And asking for help is, unfortunately, for many, many years, there was this stigma attached to it, right? This need to always be independent and, each man for its own, and this idea that we have to have it all figured out. And what I feel that people have forgotten is we are naturally tribal people. We thrive when we're part of supportive communities. In the past, when someone was grieving, the whole community would come together and lend their shoulders. When someone was celebrating, they would all dance together and they would all be part of each other's emotional experience. And now that slowly we're coming back to the sense of community and normalizing seeking help. And I actually think social media has played an instrumental role in this, with so many coaches and therapists sharing content on this platform and creating a space for people to share their grievances and to share their emotions. It's actually been really, really powerful, trying to look at it from a glass half full side on social media, of course. Tell me, what is your favorite way to release emotion?
Absolutely. And just back to what you were saying, we are pack animals and we need each other, and there is no shame in that. And there's so much opportunity in empowering our pack.
Yes.
What was
definitely.
the question? What was the last question?
My question was, what is your favorite way to release emotion?
Oh, wow. Well, so I have two. So depending on what the emotion is, if I am feeling pent up energy, I love to laugh. So there are certain movies or TV shows that I know will make me laugh during times like this. Usually if I'm feeling pent up energy, in pre-COVID times, I'd get together with some girlfriends, or my husband and I would go spend time with some couples and we would just laugh. And that is such a release. When I am feeling some heaviness or there's something lingering and I can't quite put my finger on it, I do an exercise I call sadness on purpose. And I'll watch a sad movie or I'll listen to a sad song and I'll actually get the emotion to come up. And once I start to cry, I'll actually pull in all of the thoughts that make me sad in that moment intentionally. And I ugly cry and I embrace it. And I think it's, for me, as someone who is by nature extremely emotional, always has been, it's so empowering to create that space for myself where it's like, yep, this is what I'm doing right now. And there's something good about there's something healthy about the fact that I'm carving out this space and time for me to do this. So I've been doing that for years. And then anger is another emotion. And many of my clients, their go-to emotion is anger over sadness. It's not mine. And sometimes I am experiencing anger. And when I am experiencing anger, I'll go into the corner and scream at the wall or write down some of the thoughts that are floating in my head or just share it with a friend. So there are all different ways that we can do this. The key is being incredibly responsible for releasing the emotion.
I love that. And I'd never heard of sadness on purpose. It's a very beautiful way to validate your feelings and create space for that release. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Got it.
Last question. Who is the true golden self?
So my assertion is that there are two parts to all of us. There are two parts of self. There's this golden self, the highest and best you, the essence of who you are and always have been. And then there's this survival self, the survival instinct, the survival mode or mechanism that most of us take action from most of the time, and we don't even realize it. So you at your highest and best are the things, it's who you are when you show up into a room. It's the energy that you bring. It's what the people in your life know they can always count on from you. For me, it's passion, it's vision, it's wit, it's love. That's who I am, highest and best. No matter what I do or don't do, my golden self is part of me. It's what you get when you get me. On the other side, my survival self is a perfectionist, can be very controlling because I want other people to think of me in a certain way, like me, right? And there's nothing wrong with the survival self. The idea is not like golden self is good, survival self is bad. The idea is just to know that there are these two sides of each of us and that we get a choice in any given situation as to where we come from. Living my life through this lens has really transformed my experience in relationships. And when I can relate from my golden self to other people's golden self, it's like there's so much more room for humanity. In raising teenage children, I often will ask myself, who are my children's golden selves? Because oftentimes I'm doing the tango with their survival self, and that's never good.
Wow, I love it. I love the way you named, how some people name it the ego, the inner critic. You named it the survival instinct. So relatable. My question to you is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we go through the day with these two selves kind of seeking attention, or like where our attention flows. And of course, our nature is to be our true golden self, but the survival self shows up quite often, more often than the golden self. Of course, you said awareness is so important, having awareness that these two selves exist and not judging ourselves for their presence and for our choices. But is there a specific tool or tactic that you use to pause and shift from survival to golden?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to know what your golden self is. So to ask the people in your life who know you, when I leave a room, what's missing? What can you rely on from me? Like, what do I bring to relationships? Make a list of those words, number one. Number two, when you are entering a challenging situation, the stakes are high, or you are working on something that is really important to you, just like you said, pause, check in with yourself, take a deep breath, get grounded in one of those golden self words, and move forward from that place. And just take your action reliably and consistently from that place. Write that word down wherever it is that you're going to be looking as you're in the process. Like if you're giving a presentation or you're interviewing, have it on your piece of paper, just as a place to come from. That's what I would guide someone to do as they're starting to use this tool.
I love it, Emily. So having clarity over who the true golden self is, and it's different for every single person. And then when challenges arise, to pause and to pick one of the words that we've associated with the golden self and to choose to embody it in that moment. Am I right?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. That is so practical, so doable.
Yes. What would passion do in this moment? What would vision do in this moment?
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that powerful tool with us and for sharing your journey and for all your wisdom and insights. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's been my honor.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Speak soon. Thank you for joining us this week on Minutes on Growth. If you enjoyed today's episode, then make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now.